Hello everyone, welcome along to today's Queensberry webinar. Nice to have you with us, and if you're in the UK, good evening. It's about 8 o'clock here in New Zealand, so morning to the Aussies and New Zealanders, and I guess it's the afternoon in the US, so welcome along. This is our first Queensberry album-based marketing webinar. If you saw our email last week, you'll know we've got one next week as well, which is sort of a follow-on webinar to this one. So we're looking forward to the next couple of weeks' webinar schedule. Now, this morning we've got with us Ian Bohr, who is a director and owner and founder here at Queensberry. He's going to be presenting the webinar today, and to help him, he's got Stephen Bohr, who's the managing director and CEO here at Queensberry as well, and Joe Newman, who's our UK account manager. And the three of them will be presenting and sort of having a conversation around the content today. So we look forward to hearing from these guys in a second. Before we get going, just a couple of housekeeping things. You'll notice on your control panel there's a questions section. Now, if one of the good things about a webinar is that you can interact with us live during the webinar. So if you do have a question about something that's on your mind, something that one of the guys has brought up during the presentation, feel free to chat in your question. We'll either chat back to you with an answer or suggestion, and those questions that are maybe more applicable to the whole group, I'll pull out and we'll pause during the webinar and ask the guys to sort of respond to some of those questions. So these webinars work really well when we've got sort of a conversation going on, so feel free to chat in. If we don't get to your question during the webinar, we'll get back to you afterwards, but yeah, we'd love to hear your questions and hear what you think. So I think other than that, we're pretty much good to go. We are recording it today, so we will be able to watch this. We will upload it online afterwards, so you can go back and watch it, as we will do with next week's webinar in case you can't make that one as well. There's a few people still to come, but they're trickling in, but I think we'll trot on and get going. Are you guys ready, Ian?
Yep, I'm ready. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Nigel, Stephen, and Joe. I've got to say I'm a little bit nervous about this. We've got a lot more people coming than we'd expected. We've got a situation in which Stephen, who's my son and the CEO, is going to ask questions, and you know how that is. Family, we're about to disagree about pretty much everything, and so it's also the first time that we've run through this slideshow. But I'm looking forward to it, to be honest. I think the first thing we need to establish is, why should we be talking about selling albums at all? We're not photographers. In a sense, you guys know a lot more about this than we do, and we accept that. So we do, however, have our own position, and that is that I have dealt personally with photographers for 30 going on for 40 years, and a lot of the conversations are about precisely the content of what we're speaking about today. And we also know probably quite a lot about your backyard, despite the fact that we're stuck down here in New Zealand. My experience is the photographers everywhere face pretty much the same challenges, but Joe, for example, is very familiar with the UK market, deals with our clients over there, and the same thing is true with North America and Australia and, of course, New Zealand. So yeah, we're looking forward to this. We've got strong opinions. We don't expect that everybody will believe or agree with what we're about to say here, almost by definition, given our position in the marketplace. But one last thing, by the way, if any of you have been along to a Photo Junction webinar, we ask a question in which we say, what's your level of experience? Are you a beginner? Are you experienced? Could you run this webinar? There's bound to be people out there who could. If you would like to participate in the future, give Nigel an email and we'd be interested to hear from you. That's nigel@queensberry.com. So moving right ahead, I believe that before we actually talk about the specifics of selling albums, we need to focus on the background to this, because it informs most of what we're talking about. And I compare photographers these days with this guy. This is not really a slideshow. I'm just running through the slides because otherwise my screen disappears on you. But what we're looking at there is a letter writer in the Andes, and as we all know, there is no such profession in our part of the world, because everybody has their own computer, everybody is literate, everybody can do it for themselves. And the interesting thing is that the same thing is true of photographers. When this photographer shot my mother and father's wedding in 1945, he had a job because he had a rare camera, one that could take the quality of images that you see there. My mum and dad had their own cameras, but all they could take were little pictures like this, which weren't much bigger than you can see them on the screen there. They were very inadequate. So this guy had a job because he was a good photographer and because he had a camera, and that assumption no longer applies. And you have to ask yourself, how can you succeed when everybody can take pictures and a lot of people think they're pretty much as good as you are? And they only find out that that's not true when it's too late. You know, the wedding's been shot, they asked a friend to do it, etc., etc. So what are the rules for success, if you like? And this is the core of what Queensberry stands for, and I believe it's what differentiates us in this market. And to me, the keys are that we believe if you're going to succeed in the market, you have to find ways to stand out from the crowd, not to join it. That means you shouldn't be asking your competitors or following your competitors for advice. You need to be finding ways, even if you've got role models, of making yourself appear different to them. Because in effect, there are only two ways that you compete. And if you follow our blogs, you'll have heard me say this quite often. The two ways to compete are to differentiate yourself, to stand out from the crowd, or to drop your prices. There's no other way of doing it. If you can't think of 5 ways in which you're different from your competitors, there is really only one, and that is how much you charge. And that is what they will focus on. And we all know that that second part of that at least is true. So there is another reason behind our approach to sales, and that is the most important resource in your business is your time. One of the reasons why you can't win on price is the fact that there are thousands and thousands of people coming into the industry, having a try, succeeding or failing, but generally failing, getting out of the industry and going back to what they were doing. There are always more people coming in. They can always sell for a lower price than you. But your primary resource is your time, and so therefore you have to find ways of maximizing the revenue that you get per client and the maximum perceived value out of what you're going to do with them from those limited resources. And those to me are the key things. Photographic skills are no longer enough in themselves, and in fact, in many cases, people that we've seen down the years, some of our most successful clients have not been the type of people who really score big time at the photographic awards and so on. They're good photographers, but they're not world leaders in terms of their photographic skills. But what they do have is great people skills. When somebody's sitting in the room with them, they're not sitting there, and those people are not sitting there and saying, my God, this person's trying to sell me something. They're thinking, this person is approaching me in an authentic way. He's interested in me. He's trying to find out what I want, and he's going to try and give it to me. You also need business skills. You need to be able to look at your model to know how much you need to charge to work out to work out a marketing plan which works, etc., etc. So photographic skills, people skills, business skills, and to my way of thinking, informed by differentiation. The last thing, and to me this is something which is so basic it's embarrassing to say, but you need to focus on the people in your viewfinder. If you read, for example, Johan's posts on the Queensberry blog, you will see a lot of conversation about this, about getting to know those people as individuals, finding out what they want as individuals, not as brides and grooms in general, but to find out what they want. Do they want a fairy story? Do they want photojournalism? Whatever it is, but to find out what they want and to give that to them, to tell their story rather than somebody else's. So what sort of thing do we see in our day-to-day work as albums pass through the factory? I'm not saying this is typical of Queensberry clients, but I think this makes the point. This photograph is by Simon Whitten from the UK. We love it. It's off our website. To me, when I look at that picture, I feel if I could just see 2 or 3 more of these images, I would know these people. I see 4 people dressed up in funny clothes. This is a fairy story. It's not day-to-day, everyday life. But I see 4 individuals. I see a bride who looks incredibly happy, and I want to see more pictures. The interesting thing in this industry is that normally you don't see that. You see this. You see people bowled up in a corner, getting pictures taken, looking vaguely embarrassing, wonder what they should do next. And to me, there is a world of difference between that, where the photographer is bringing out the personality of the people there, and this, where he's not, or this, where you have, let's say, dubious taste. An interesting thing about dubious taste is that you only recognize it when it's old hat. You don't recognize today's dubious taste. Or you see something like this where again you've got people not really behaving naturally. To me, this is not powerful photography, and the first thing you need to do is to find ways of connecting with your client. So that is the background to how we feel um, about wedding photography in particular, and what you need to succeed in it. You need to find a way of connecting with the client and differentiating yourself in the market. And I might just pause here and ask if Joe or Stephen or Nigel want to interject before I move on and start to talk about albums in particular.
Can I interject? I think certainly from the point of view as a UK rep talking to, around probably 200 photographers a year, um, times are tough at the moment, but the clients that I talk to that are succeeding are the ones that are continually pushing the boundaries, particularly of their photographic style, the way they manage their business. They're always thinking ahead about things like social marketing, how can they get their name out there, and they're not following sort of traditional methods in terms of advertising and so on, and that's what's helping them to retain their differentiation and keep their market going. And there's plenty of my clients out there that are saying they're not particularly seeing sort of down times because of the recession, because they've managed to maintain their business just the same as they did when things were good. The ones that struggle are the ones that have got stuck in a bit of a rut, and are finding it hard to see the way out of that.
I think it's great to hear somebody, there's no denying that times are tough at the moment, and it's great to hear people approaching this with a positive sort of an attitude. Shall I move on, or Stephen, do you have anything to say?
I wanted to, sorry, add to that. I think at the end of the day, one of the things here, I felt a little bit nervous when I saw that last image, because it's not in itself a bad image. It's been crafted and people have done a nice job of it. The question is this the way the bride wanted to be remembered, or is this? I mean, did this person decide to give a fairy tale? And for me, from a sales background, the thing which is not going to bring a photographer success is skill, skill with their camera or skill in Photoshop. It is actually being able to make a connection with the bride and groom and so forth. So I think that in some ways what we're seeing is not really, at the end of the day, the technique. I mean, the technique's fantastic, but I can remember when I went on a sales trip once, being surprised that our best photographers as dollar value of spend were in fact actually probably not necessarily the best, taking the highest quality images. And I think one of the risks is that as people have lost their confidence, they've gone and been sucked into the pack rather than standing alone and being true to themselves and true to how do they make a connection with somebody. And I was talking to Joe last night, and I was reminded of a guy I worked with, and I said to him once, I said, John, what's, I mean, this guy was very, very successful. I said, well, what's the idea? I mean, what's the secret to success? And he said, Stephen, there's three main rules. The first one is make sure you have lots and lots of debt, because it makes you motivated to go out the door in the morning. I followed that advice for quite a long time. The second thing is that don't let anybody see the fear in your eyes, and because what people naturally pick up on is, if you are scared, if you're worried about losing this particular piece of business, then they wonder why you're worried about losing this piece of business. This must mean that you're being unsuccessful. So in my mind, the only way of actually really being successful is to be very, very clear about who you are as a photographer, what you're confident about, what you like doing, who you connect with, and make sure that you actually approach everything first on what is the relationship I want to have with this couple, or the people in the portrait session. And I think that's what we mean by connecting with the people in the viewfinder. at the beginning part, the album, the place I'm going to take the photos and so on is completely irrelevant, and so is the package. It's, is there a personality fit? Because a bad client will stuff up your day as much as a bad relationship with a client will stuff up your day as much as you will theirs. And if there's not a fit, you have to make sure that there is one first. So does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I love that bit about not seeing the fear in your eyes. You have to project confidence, even if you don't feel it. A difficult skill sometimes. Okay, let's move on then.
But making the right choices so you can feel confident,
Yep.
even if it's an experiment, will allow you to be confident rather than just pretending. So,
Well,
anyways.
also, and there's nothing stopping you from making changes if things don't work out. That's the nature of life as well. Anyway, let's move on and talk about albums specifically. We talk about the Queensberry rules, and that's not about boxing, it's the Queensberry rules for photographers. And there are two rules, and only two rules. The first one is that the great presentation, just as it does with wine bottles, just as it does with perfume, just as it does with... Sorry, my phone's decided to go. Everything else is turned off, I promise you. Yeah, great presentation, great packaging, whatever you want to call it, adds value to the product it contains. Our albums are products which contain vessels which contain your imagery, and they add value to them. If they don't, then that's a problem that needs to be resolved. The converse, the second rule, is that packaging that looks like everybody else's, that looks like a commodity, that looks like it's generic, does not add value, and in fact it can detract from the value. And that is the basic factor behind, one of the basic factors behind your choice of albums, in our opinion. So when you look at how albums add to the bottom line, it's worthwhile looking at what they do. First of all, there is the fact that when you sell an album, you make a profit on it, hopefully. The actual sale generates more money in your back pocket than if you hadn't made the sale. If you sell an album with an album, you got more money than if you just sell a stack of prints or whatever. But the second part of that is about strategy, and that's about the upsell opportunity. We'll talk about that later on. So you've got the profit on the original sale, which may occur when the person comes in and makes a booking and commits themselves to buying a Queensberry album or whatever it is that they're doing. And then there is the upsell opportunity that comes later on, and we're going to talk about that. But quite separate from the profit that you're going to make when you sell an album are the things that it do to your business regardless of that. So profit, positioning, promotion. By positioning, I mean the fact that anybody in business projects their position in the market by the way that they dress, by the car that they drive, by their premises, by your studio in your particular case, by your albums. These things say, I'm low end, I'm high end, I'm in the middle, I'm successful, I'm old fashioned, I'm up to date, I'm trendy, I'm hip, whatever it is. They position you in the market. So the albums are a key part of that in exactly the same way. You don't sell your studio, and in that sense you don't need to sell an album to position yourself. Obviously that's not much use to Queensberry. We like it when you sell albums, but nevertheless there's no denying that your albums position yourself. If you're selling a musée, for example, if you're familiar with that, a new product range, if that's in your studio, that tells some powerful things about where you see yourself in the market. And the last thing is promotion. The fact that wherever that album goes, it's a silent salesman for your business. And to me, this is one of the key things about albums and what differentiates you in the market. That album goes out there, it's seen by the family, it's seen by the friends. They have the opportunity to say, wow, I love that. Where'd you get it from? Who was the photographer? How much did it cost? Good grief, not that much surely, because people will say how much it was because they're proud of it. That person is at least potential for a future customer. And of course, most of us know very well that word of mouth, previous clients are a powerful source of business for most people that have been in this industry for very long. So that positioning is important to us, and I just wanted to show quickly one or two examples of what we mean by that. If you go to our website, that you'll see that we have done our utmost to make our albums look upmarket, beautiful, the opposite of a commodity. Our entire album business, our entire website is based upon that principle. And we've encouraged people to go out and to project the albums, to get them out into the community in the virtual world, which is now just as important as the real world. So we've got things like, for example, like this I Own a Queensberry Facebook page, which every day pretty much we show another album and encourage people to come back and to use it as a way as to spread the good word about Queensberry albums in particular in this case. And there are a few examples here on our mentions blog, which show what people are actually doing. For example, we've got Guy Collier there talking about on his blog about Grant and Amy's album and showing the fact that he just doesn't do photography, but he sells albums. And if you go and look at it, you'll see that these look beautiful. This is what he wants to sell, and he's showing you what he wants you to buy. We've got somebody else there from Puerto Rico, David Medina, who's recently come on as a client, and then Kelly Tunney from Australia. I just saw this the other day. I thought it was really rather cool. But she's got her album designer just unpacking an album and looking at it, and it shows something of great value. They're projecting it as having great value. What does great value mean? It means you spend money. She's projecting herself, Kelly's projecting herself at a good position in the market at the high end. I thought that was really rather clever. Have a look around and you see people doing these things to use the albums as silent salesmen, if you like. Just introducing a few concepts here. I mentioned this earlier that to me this is another basic thing which people ignore surprisingly often, that there are two steps to the sales process. The first part, when you're actually selling the booking before the wedding, is not the complete thing, and yet many people treat it as if it is. You make the booking, they've committed themselves to a coverage of some sort and a 12 by 12 album or whatever with a certain number of pages in it, and people treat that as if that's the end of it, but it's not. It's the beginning. After the wedding, when people come back to see you and they see the photographs that you've taken, which look like this, not like this, they're going to fall in love with them, in my opinion, and that gives you the opportunity to upsell. And albums are a way of offering that opportunity. So, core concept in albums is the idea of the package. We believe.
Can I interrupt?
Yes.
Can I interrupt there just before you move on there? I'm
Yep.
kind of as I was hearing you talk about the selling the booking, it reminded me of a conversation I had with Rod Elmore, a very successful photographer from New Zealand a number of years ago, and I said to him, well, you know, how do you feel about how photographers approach it? And he said, well, I think most people have the whole approach wrong. They, on the first phone call, try to sell what they do. He says, but I'm very clear about it. I have a strategy. I'm adding my words in here now, but he's choreographed how he wants the process of interaction with people to be. He starts with an advertisement which attracts the right people and makes the wrong people not want to contact him. But when the phone rings, he's not selling the album. He's selling the appointment to get them in their studio. When he gets them in the studio, he's selling the wedding and the whole process of the relationship along the way. He's introducing them as to where the end goal is going to be, what other people do. Here, look at somebody else's album and so forth. And I think that's a really key thing, is that, you know, we've got to get passionate about the relationship and so forth. And as part of that, somebody said to me, oh, Stephen, it's so hard, you know. The magazines are asking me for shoot and burn, and oh gosh, you know, we can only sell weddings here for, you know, £1,000. But the reality is that's true if you're playing by everybody else's rules. And if I was the photographer, what I would be doing is to say on that phone call, look, I can't give you the information without knowing it. But what I want to do is I want to talk to you about what you need to get from a photographer way before you even talk about whether I'm the right photographer for you, and start talking to them about the effect of the wrong photographer on the day if there's not a personality match. And please, even if you don't choose me, make sure you go and you visit the photographers and have a cup of coffee with them. Because once I have coffee with somebody, I know I'm going to have a lot better chance of winning the business than if I just answer it in that one phone call. And now I'm setting the rules of interaction. I can choose what I take on that meeting and so forth. So there's got to be a choreographed thought about how I'm going to handle each thing from the phone call right through. And I think the social media side allows you to completely leverage that. Sadly, well, positively, rich people have rich friends, but sadly, you know, poor people have poor friends. The blogging, the Facebook, and all that sort of thing gives you the opportunity to influence people way beyond the first phone call. And if you keep pointing them back over that 6 or 12 month period until they get married, at, oh, here's a beautiful album, go have a look at it. Is this a style of photography you want? You're building an expectation in the head about where you want them to go, rather than saying, I've got to be able to get this sale on the first phone call. So, which I think too many people try to do. So,
I agree with that.
Can I just
we,
interact as well?
yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, just one more comment. Just going back to what Ian said about time being your most valuable resource. The problem with not managing that properly is that there's more of a tendency to try and get the sale quickly, because you haven't really got time to keep spending with these people, treating it as a 5-step process or whatever. So I just really wanted to reiterate the point that Ian made, that time is our most precious resource, and we need to be able to give ourselves time to do the sale properly, and then be more successful at it.
I think that's a good point. In fact, you've got to decide where that time is spent. You could spend it on production work, for example. You could sell it on sales and marketing. You can only spend it once.
Well, yeah, but I think that some people have more time than others, because they take the minutes they spend, or sort of use the minutes they have more effectively. Does that make sense? I mean, a lot of people spend a huge amount of time on Facebook and so on, working out what other people do, and don't spend enough time sitting up on the hill and deciding who they want to be. It's a lot more valuable spending time in front of a customer than playing in Photoshop and so forth, because it's in those relationships that your future's set. So yes, it's absolutely valuable, and therefore part of differentiation for us is don't waste it. Make sure. I mean, if somebody doesn't want to spend time with you, why do you want to spend time with them? If they want to invest some time in you, I know I'm oversimplifying in some ways, but there's got to be a starting point where you say, I am a professional photographer. This is how I run my business, and you look at connection and how you're going to connect with people who are like you and who will have an amazing day. Anyway, sorry, I'll let you back to it.
No problem. I think it's all true. Let's talk about packages, however. I presume everybody knows what we mean by packages. They've got a bad word, they've got a bad reputation in some areas, and I think I know why. But to me, for some of the reasons that Stephen's just been talking about, they're absolutely essential. Because to me, when that client comes in, you've got to assume that prospect comes in to see you or sees you online. They have no idea what you need, what you do, especially if you believe in differentiation. What they know about you is that somebody says you've got to get your photographs taken at a wedding, or what they've heard on the Knot, or what all of those budget operators out there are saying. They don't know about you. So how can you actually define what you do? Well, if you think of it in terms of an actual face-to-face visit, there's only one way to find out, and that's to come in and see. And if you give them the a la carte approach, which is the opposite of a package, you're really asking them to choose off a list about which they understand very little. So to me, a package is a way of defining what you want people to buy. It's a way of managing the offer to them. And it's also a way of being generous with what you want to sell. In the same way as, for example, if you go to McDonald's, and of course none of us do, but if you go to McDonald's, they offer you a combo, and by comparison with offering you the bits separately, it's comparatively cheap. But that's what they want to sell, and they do better because of it. So a package is a way of presenting what you want to offer, and I'm going to suggest that you have more than one. And again, this is all very basic, but you need to build into your concept of a package, and we'll talk about them now, the opportunity to be flexible, because I think what people don't like about them is that they feel that by offering a package, you're getting rid of the opportunity to upsell and give people what they really want. So that connects with a key thing for Queensberry, and that is what we suggest that people buy for sample albums. Now, we offer a deal, and people buy them each year, but what should you be trying to accomplish by purchasing them? Are you just trying to get a new album with a fancy cover or whatever? Possibly you want to show a beautiful couple getting married, or more up-to-date clothing or things like that. But separate from those things, I think that what you're trying to do with your sample albums is to illustrate your packages in the albums, to show people what you want them to buy, to show them how much they are going to, what it's going to cost them. And they really are the things that you need to decide when you're doing when you're planning your sample albums, to illustrate your packages. And I put up there a little note to remind myself to say that I believe that you should avoid what we call greatest hits albums when you do this. A greatest hits album in our language is to say that you take a few hero shots from a number of weddings or whatever, put them all together and make a sample album out of that. We don't think that's very compelling for two reasons. Anybody can pick and choose a number of good pictures. It doesn't mean to say that you can shoot a complete wedding or whatever and have everything of a high standard. And it's also not what you want somebody to buy. It's not illustrating what you're selling. Anybody want to comment before we move on to that and actually talk about packages? Good, better, and best.
Ian, we're
I think you summed it up for me.
Cool.
just before we move on, Ian, on the questions front, we've had one question which we'll get to shortly, Nick, which I think is related to what Ian's talking about at the moment. But to everyone else, the questions are live. So if you do have any questions about what Ian's talking about, or anything that Stephen or Joe said, do chat in and we will answer them. It's a good opportunity to interact with us live, and yeah, feel free to chat in.
Cool.
Sorry, Ian.
Okay. Yeah, Nick's got a good question there, but we'll get to it shortly.
So I think the only thing that I'd add is, I've been talking a little bit about confidence, and I think the thing about if somebody's not particularly confident about being the sales process, the nice thing about a package is here's what you're going to get for your money, and you're trying to create an environment where all the bride and groom need to do is to imagine themselves in the photos. And it takes away a whole lot of being able to manage a complicated conversation about here is this choice and that choice and so forth. And I think that's a very powerful thing about them. But the most important thing is that the need for an entry-level package is how much am I prepared to go out the door with? I mean, you did a very powerful calculator a few years ago, which showed the basic running costs of a studio, and maybe we can distribute this later. But there is a reality facing professional photographers, and that is that unlike some people who have a full-time job and sell for $500 on the weekend, they have to run a business and they have to take home a wage which is more than minimum wage and so forth. And therefore, as soon as you've used up your Saturday by somebody who's not giving you enough money, then it's wasted. So a package is setting the scene. It's got to be competitive and it's got to be attractive and it's got to be worth your time. But you're making a decision of what you're promoting to people and so forth. And but your entry level package has to be differentiated from everybody else as much as anything else. So.
Well. Okay, well, let's see how you respond to what I'm going to say here then, Stephen. I think that this is so basic, and every time I have these conversations with people, and I've been having them for years and years, and anybody that knows me has heard me do this, it's so simple, but it's so powerful that you need to have good, better, and best. Good means not so good at all, really, but it's what gets people in the door. You go out to buy anything from a pair of shoes to a car or whatever, you know how much you want to spend. So, this happens to us, to Queensberry at trade shows. How much do your albums cost? Well, who wants that question, really? How much is it going to cost me to shoot that wedding? But that's the only question people know how to ask. You need to have an answer of some sort, which is going to not turn them away. So your good package is something which is going to encourage them to come in and see what you really do. The better and best is really what you're trying to sell. I should say, by the way, that in my hallucination, the good package is also what these people are going to buy, because they're not going to really like their weddings. You've got to actually have the photographic resource to sell them. They've got to love their imagery. That is the first challenge. But anyway, let's look at good, better, and best in more detail.
God, I hope that photographer's not in the audience.
Simon, I don't know whether Simon's here or not, but I'm being nice to him. This one here I bought on iStock, another challenge for photographers. So yeah, I apologize for that. Yes, let's skip on past it. So good, better, and best. I need to make some basic points about this. defining your packages, it's not just about the albums. It's about the price points. It's about what's going to get them in the door that you don't really want to sell them. It's about how much you need to sell to make your budget. It's about what they could spend with you if they really fell in love with what you do. It's about the price points, and then about what can add the value to justify those price points, and it's not necessarily about the album. But you do need to match your sample albums to their packages. So let's go and have a look at some of the things which can add value. And I'm sure that there's lots of other things here which we could add. I just sort of came up with this list myself. But as you can see there, some of those things add value, don't add very much value. They're sort of low price options, if you like. Like I've put down there affordable options. Like you might have a leather cover or a press book instead of a duo or a musée with leather in the whole 9 yards. You can spend lots more money on the albums, but also how much time are you going to spend? Are you going to spend the entire day with them? Are you going to do that for your good package? Are you just going to go along to the ceremony or whatever? They've heard your price. What are they really going to get for it? How many locations are you going to go to? How can you do them a slideshow? A slideshow only takes you a few minutes in Photo Junction. Are you just going to give them a box of prints? What is it that you're going to do? Are you going to spend a day artworking their images before they go in the album? There are lots of things which can add value to your packages, and they need to all be considered in terms of what you give for what price point. And I have some criteria for that. The first one is, we've already said several times, your most valuable resource is your own time. So if you go and add value, how much of your time is it going to take? If you are going to artwork the images, that's a day, maybe 2 days. People spend amazing amounts of time designing albums and artworking images and so on. So do I think that you should give that away for your entry-level package? Probably not. You need to have something in reserve. Next thing to ask yourself is how much cash stays in your pocket. And in fact, by that I'd mean not so much, I'm not talking about markups, I'm talking about how much is going to stay in your pocket for the effort that's gone into making the sale. So for example, to order a parent album in Photo Junction means ticking a box. So you could look at that parent album and how much it's going to cost you, and you could say, well, I want to multiply that by 3 or 4 to set the price I'm going to sell it for, but nobody's going to buy it at that price. Or you could say, well, ticking the box didn't take me a lot of time, and they'd love it if I charged them so much money. I'd rather have that amount of money than nothing. So those sort of that sort of thinking has to get into your head. I can remember going to a meeting of the New Zealand Institute in Auckland years and years ago, talking to a guy called Bob Tulloch, who's very well known in these areas, and he was talking about selling sample albums actually, and he was selling them with every wedding, and somebody in the audience was saying, well, that's ridiculous, honestly, he's charging so little for them, it's hardly worthwhile. But Bob was selling them with every wedding, and this person who was charging a decent markup for them was never selling them at all. So who's right and who's wrong, I don't know. But to me, the key thing on that list there is, are you giving away the crown jewels? Are you going to give away the crown jewels for your good package, the one that you don't really want to sell? What are the things that these people really want to buy, and how are you going to present them in such a way that it encourages them to buy up rather than buy down? The key one to me in this area, in my opinion, is shoot and burn. Shoot and burn to me is the crown jewels. If you offer shoot and burn and they can get in there and that's your good package, what are your chances of selling anything else? Pretty much zero. Well, I would suggest so anyway. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But this is the key question to ask yourself in any case. Is this a crown jewel? Should I be giving it away, or how should I be making maximum advantage of it? So, looking at good, better, and best in more detail, what's the purpose of good? It's to get people in the door to see what you do. It needs to be appealing, but not too appealing, because you don't want to sell it. You want them to come in and see what you really do and want to buy something better. So I've trying to illustrate it out of something in the Queensberry range. I've shown our DVD cases. You're not spending a lot of money with a DVD case. It's good if you like, but also, as I've suggested, if it contains all of your high-res images, maybe a little bit dangerous too, or at least something that requires a bit of thought. So that's the good package, just to get them in the door. You don't want to sell it. Better is what you expect to sell, what you need to sell, what hits budget. And The power of it is that they never knew that such a thing existed. I did a blog post a couple of other days about a room full of millionaires in the States who had never seen an album like the one that you're looking at on the screen there. And I'm sorry, but I can't remember who the photographer is. It's a beautiful album. We did
Stuart
blog about
Cooper.
it sometime. Thank you.
Mm.
So this is something they never knew existed. They never knew existed, and all of a sudden they do, and they want it. Now, Stephen just mentioned the calculator that I did a few years ago. How much this is your budget option. This is what you need to sell to hit budget, because I'm defining that's what better is. It's the middle of the range. You need to do that to hit budget. How much do you need to charge to hit budget? Do you know? And that's the purpose of the calculator, and it's also the subject of next week's webinar, which is about working out how much you need to charge given your existing business model and what you could possibly do about it. So that's better. Best is just out of this world. Best is they look at it and they think, my God, I wish I could afford that. I can't, but I wish I could. It gives perspective to better. This is what you want to sell. Best, and I've illustrated that with Musée, but I'm saying it's not about the product, it's about what you show them when they come in. I wish I could afford that. My gosh, it's beautiful. But still, the better option, which before that looked outrageously expensive and they never even knew it existed, now looks like something that they could actually have and maybe they should settle for. So the purpose of good, better, best is to calibrate the range of what you should do and to get people to move their expectations up from what they came in the door based on price and without any knowledge of what you could do to what you need and want to sell them and what they're going to love if they buy it. The best, of course, at this point, they make your day. This is more than budget. They've gone through the roof in terms of your expectations, and you need to approach that with generosity, with being grateful for what they've done. The interesting thing, of course, is you don't want to sell too many of the best. You don't want to sell, let me move back. You don't want to sell too many of the good. You want to sell the better. If in fact you find that everybody is selling your quote best package, it probably means you're leaving money on the table. In fact, that you could extend your range of packages up to ask for more money. You're actually doing better. You could do better than you are now. Last thing about that, as I say, is about the upsell. A package is something which you're asking people pretty much to commit to before the day. They come in there, they say, "Wow, I want one of those duo albums." So I'm gonna book it. You've made the deal, the package so attractive in various other ways that this is what they want to do. But still, it's something which they can add to, and we all understand about this, that you can sell more pictures because they now love their own pictures. They're looking at their pictures, not somebody else's. You can add the pages which those pictures are going to go on. You make more profit from doing this. And Stephen mentioned Rod Elmore's name earlier on. I can remember Rod saying to me that he routinely added 50% to the amount that they'd committed to in the upsell process after the event, and this is what you can expect if you proceed to do it. Again, getting back to what sometimes amazes us is how few people take advantage of this opportunity, how few people try and talk to offer people the opportunity to buy more than they committed to before the wedding when they hadn't even seen their pictures. Last thing about that upsell, I've mentioned pre-design there. PhotoJunction makes this incredibly easy to show people what they could buy and to encourage them to buy it. And we are, after all, despite the fact that we all love photography and love what we do, we're in this business to make money. Okay, I'll pause for breath. Anybody else want to add?
Joe?
I was just going to say, I'm sure one of the thoughts that will be going through people's minds listening to what Ian was just talking about was, yes, that's all very well, but people are telling me they haven't got the money to spend at the moment. And Stephen and I had a very interesting conversation this morning where we were talking about ways of making it possible for your client to have what they want, even though their head, if you like, is telling them that they can't afford it. And one of those ways is to almost like a credit type situation. The example Stephen gave this morning was suggesting to the client that maybe they make a down payment and then pay so much per month for 12 months or whatever it takes, and then they get their album at the end of it. But then this afternoon I had an interesting conversation with Andrew John up in Liverpool, who'd been to a recent seminar with Eileen Mason, who's a very successful portrait photographer in the Midlands. And what they've done is they've introduced interest-free credit. And to do that, you need a credit license, and then obviously you have to work out the terms, how you're actually going to provide the credit. But basically, it's finding a way of enabling your client to make that impulse purchase and pay for it in such a way that it seems like a very good deal, which obviously interest-free credit does. So the point I'm really trying to make is think creatively about how you can enable your client to have what they really want at the time when you're most likely to sell the most to them, which is the first time they see their images and they're feeling much more emotional about the whole thing, rather than allowing them to wait, maybe do shoot and burn and then come back in 6 months or a year to get their album, because 99% of the time they won't.
I think they're all very, they're good points. The thing for me, I mean, if I was doing shoot and burn, for example, there is no way that even if the person didn't want to buy an album, that I'd let something go out which wasn't presented in a book of some sort. I mean, absolute minimum, I would build into my cost the ability to buy a press book and give it to them as a gift afterwards, because photos on a CD or a DVD are not going to sell anything on your behalf. The difficulty of what I'm saying is that it's going to set the fact that you do, shoot and burn, but it's certainly better than nothing, and you can build up from there. I think of people like Malcolm Matheson. He used to always say to his photographers, my packages start at, but my average customer spends this month much. So over the period of their relationship, 6, 12, whatever months, he was setting an expectation as to how it is. Because the role of the photographer is they have to be resourceful, and it's a really key word, is to think about how the game has been played now, to get people to make different choices on their wedding day, because they're certainly spending the money, and they'll spend more money on flowers than they will on average on a photographer. So get them to make a choice about something that they can share with their grandchildren, rather than something that's going to be laying in a trash can like the flowers the following day. It's about how are we going to influence them as an industry. A whole website, I own a Queensberry website, is about trying to get the consumer to think about this. But equally so, I said earlier on about John Burke's advice of being, having a lot of debt. For much of my life, I had too much debt. I mean, I'll be hands up, I'll admit to that. But that means if I went to a photographer and my only option was to spend $6,000 with them right now, get your credit card out and do it, or nothing, I would have to choose nothing. Does it make sense? But I want to keep my wife happy. So help me find a way of having that, of solving that problem, even if I have to pay it off over a certain period of time, because I want it. Don't have any problems making the payments for a few months, but don't put me in a position where it's pay it now or nothing, because there are just too many people who are doing it. I mean, you were saying, Joe, last night it was very easy in Ireland to go and put your wedding on your mortgage and then do whatever you like and then pay it off over the next 20 years, and that situation has disappeared. That's true, but people are still spending lots of money on their weddings, so we have to try just a little bit harder to how to influence them and to help them make better choices. Because for me, and this is the part where I'm really passionate about this industry, is my two memories of my grandparents was fishing with my grandfather and listening to stories with started by my grandmother, and every time she did it, she went and got her photograph albums out, and whenever she spoke of somebody, she would point to somebody in the photograph. Now you can't do that with images on a photograph, on a computer. And I'm like Mr. Geek. This is like, I love computers. Our computers are full of digital images and so on, but I still want something physical that I can touch and feel and be proud of, and have, if you look at Sonia's albums, for example, she's decided to crop her photos and make photo choices and so on to tell the story of our children the way she remembers them. Whereas 1,000 images on a DVD does not do that. It does not prioritize or anything. When we got married, within a couple of years of being married, 7 people who were at our wedding, had passed away. with time, our album became more and more and more precious to us. But photographers have to connect on an emotional level with their brides and grooms first, and second of all, get them to connect on the importance of telling their story the way they want to be remembered. Because this is a coming together of two families. It's not just about the business of it. But the nice thing is that the reward for doing that right, for those connections, is actually to be successful in your business. To be remembered and to have something that bride and groom take around and smile and treasure and tell their friends about, and from that their friends bring you more business. Anyway, I'm a bit off topic there, but your packages should represent those choices you're making anyway. So
we're talking about two different things here. You listening to Stephen here and listening to the passion and enthusiasm, whatever you want to say, whatever words fit you, is different to what we're talking about. We're talking about how you structure things to get the result that you want, but you cannot do the one without the other. You have to love what you do. And from the client's point of view, to me, there is one word which sums this up, and that word, it's not my word, it's not the way that I speak, but it is wow. If people don't come in and say to yourself, my God, that's beautiful, how much, then you need to work on it. And that is the emotion behind the construction. Anyway, we've got about 6 or 7 minutes to go, and pretty much I've said everything that I want to. We could do two things. Well, actually, let's just run through these. I'll just say this very quickly.
Why don't we answer some of the questions if we've got that little time?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Okay. By all means. There's some good ones there too. Should we start off with somebody have a go with that one of Nick's that we mentioned earlier on? Nick's saying that I find that with the higher cost of your albums, it's not possible for me to mark them up much, which means that when I sell a Queensberry album, it costs me more, but I might make little more than the cheaper alternatives. How do you respond to that, you two? Joe, do you want to have a try?
Okay.
What would you say?
Well, my first reaction to that question was you shouldn't sell something unless you can make at least as much profit on it as you do on something else. There doesn't seem to be much point from a long-term business goal perspective in doing that. But then I went on to think, well, actually, a Queensberry album it's more than just a commodity. It does actually set the position of your business. It is a silent salesman for you. So you might decide that even though you're going to make slightly less profit on a Queensberry album, you would rather have your images going out there in a Queensberry than in a cheaper alternative that really doesn't make you look very different from anybody else. And I think when you're, certainly when you're in a sort of starting up type situation, there's a lot to be said for compromising a little bit on profit in order to establish the position that you want to be in, and then obviously the price has to go up after that. But it certainly shouldn't be a long-term strategy that you're making less profit than you need to, because that obviously isn't going to give you a long-term business and a decent income.
No, I totally agree with that. I mean, the thing is, at the end of the day, I always say to people, look, we've got, you've got to measure your relationship with Queensberry in one of three ways. One or two ways. Do we add value to your business, or do we help save you time? Yeah, because I think at the end of the day, that's what we do. If we don't help you make more money out of your wedding photography, we haven't earned our place in the relationship. The second thing is, if we haven't helped save time in the way you do your wedding photography, we haven't added value to your business. And people will use us for one of those two reasons. And I say to people, well, if we don't do those two things, make sure you enjoy the process. And enjoying the process might be just you like dealing business with us. I mean, I saw somebody the other day comparing us to the Flight of the Conchords, which I found amusing, or the fact that when you deliver the album, you have this pride and confidence that you've delivered best in world. Not just best in world in terms of the photography you took, but in the album choice you made. Because there's lots of other choices, and as a starting point, you do that. But if we've done our job right together, and you've been resourceful in terms of how you've influenced people, and you've chosen to be confident and so forth, then the truth is, over time, Nick, you should be able to, through playing with your prices and so on, increase your prices and redefine your customer base so you're absolutely unique, and Nick gets to shine through, and people come together for Nick. And do you understand what I mean? It's like, the sum of all the parts is just so powerful, and people feel that they'd be crazy not to use you. But it's not the album in itself that's the problem. The second thing is some people sometimes get confused between margin and contribution. You know, if on a margin basis, Musée doesn't make us as much money as some of the smaller albums, but on a contribution basis, because it's a high value product, it does. So you might have in your press books, you know, the press book end of the market, you might be selling for $1,500, and I've spent $150 on costs, and you think, oh, presentation should therefore be 10% of my cost. But at 6,000, I think it would be unrealistic to say I'm going to use a $600 album, because you're not going to be differentiated with that. So you might say 30%, but the amount of profit in that sale is completely different. So there has to be a strategy of moving up and deciding which customers are going to do it, and you know, a little bit of targeting about who I'm going to influence. And the last thing I'd finish off is that we got told off the other day that we don't know, we wouldn't know the conditions in this person's particular market, and that's true. But we sell in lots of countries around the world, and what we see everywhere is that, you know, what is the market today? You know, we have Johan's up in Europe last week, a couple of weeks ago, shooting a wedding. The you know, Facebook and so on is allowing photographers to not just look in their hometowns now for the people to do it. And there is, you know, the statistics Ian had the other day, you know, there's more millionaires today than there were last year, and you know, just got to have a strategy for it. But I think that the idea of the marketing seminars is to try and get some of those ideas out more and more over the next little while. So.
Can we just deal with a couple of other quick things before we go? We need to honour the fact that we said 10 o'clock. I think we're probably happy to continue talking for a few minutes, but and certainly to answer questions. But there were a couple of brief little things in here that I think we should have a look at, if I can find them. Somebody said that pre-design has always made, Alexander, has made clients feel that we're trying to make more money out of them. How do you avoid this? I noticed that was one or two people here that I know use pre-design. To my way of thinking, the language is really important, and you need to think about how it's presented. But part of that is about setting expectations ahead of time, which is one of the things I was going to talk about here. That you need to set the expectation that you're going to show them something which is beautiful. You need, find your own words, but to show them something, you set the expectation that you're going to show them what can be done with these images, even though it's going to be more expensive. I don't know, but what's going to make you comfortable and how you say it is going to vary from person to person, I think.
I agree with that. The clients that I know that are using pre-design successfully are making sure that throughout the sales process they're explaining to their bride and grooms that that's how it works. You know, that they are going to shoot a lot of images. They do that because they want to tell the best story, and they will pre-design an album because they want the bride and groom to see what's possible. And of course, the bride and groom have the opportunity to remove pages or to change things if that's what they want to do. But obviously the hope is that the bride and groom will go with what's been designed. And certainly I've got one client who does this very successfully and often sells twin volume sets because he designs in excess of 40 pages per wedding. But he makes it a very good deal for the client, the bride and groom, to go with that design and not make any changes to it. So he tells them he's going to do it regularly throughout the process of first meeting through to actually showing them the pre-design, and then he gives them a very good deal to say yes, that's what we want, but he's still making more profit than he would be if they took lots of pages out and just had what they'd initially purchased.
That's the idea. That's right.
Yeah. But everybody knows to a certain extent there's going to be a sales process start at some point. You know, it's just business. When you go and buy a car, you don't just get to go look around the car yard and choose what you want. Somebody's going to come and try to sell something to you. And I think there's a thing that we need to stay true to the relationship we have with them, but make sure there's no surprises. And therefore, if you've set the expectation like Malcolm did of, my packages start at, but most people spend, or I'm going to design your album and because I think, it's the way I work, or how you do it. You're still setting the expectation, but but the most important thing is to make sure the person feels in control and make sure there's no surprises. I mean, Sonia and I had a portrait session a few years ago, and when we turned up to have a look at the images, suddenly the photographer wasn't showing it. A person we'd never met was showing the images because she knew the software, but you knew she was a salesperson. She wouldn't tell us the prices. She wouldn't, the whole thing was all these beautiful images on the wall, and we wanted to buy them, but because we didn't know what we committed to when we made the choices, it's like, oh, okay, next. And in the end, we ended up leaving, having bought 3 and we didn't want to be embarrassed with buying nothing, but we would have bought a lot more had we known the rules in advance of making the choices. So there's a very fine line between being true to the fact that you're running a business and making sure the person feels in control and so forth. So, and that's true of album design or portrait sales and so forth. So.
Somebody else has asked about using the Queensberry Design Service and being able to offer pre-design. Do you have any advice about that, Joe? Is it a way to show clients a pre-design using the Queensberry Design Service?
Well, there is. I mean, you can choose. Let's say, for example, the client has purchased 75 images. You want to try and upsell them on some extra ones, so you can choose 100, 120 images or whatever, and send those to us to design for you. But I think it's something that we need to look at as a service, because the client would be charged for 120 images being designed, and then of course if their client wants to take lots out or wants to make a lot of changes, then there could be quite a lot of edit charges on top of that for us to make those changes for them. We have got some clients that are, because they want to use print ready, we have agreed that we'll do the initial design and then send them the project so that they can make their own edits and take it from there. So
Right.
I guess that might be a way of doing it, that we do an initial design and then we hand it back to the client to finish it off, if you like. But I think it's something that we perhaps need to look at internally to see if there's a better way that we can offer a pre-design service.
I think that's something
you're gonna get shot there, Joe. That was
Yeah.
that was
Sorry.
like In-N-Out Burger's secret menu.
That's right.
That was like an experiment you're talking about there. So, but it is true. I mean, I think the thing is, you were talking earlier on about time being valuable, and the thing about the Queensberry Design Service is we're trying to say, look, we can make your life easier by doing the work for you. And you're going to earn a lot more money taking another photograph in a portrait shoot, or doing one more wedding, or avoiding the divorce because you're working all night designing albums and so forth. If you want prepared to spend a lot of money there. So I don't think the edits needs to be a reason for not doing it, but it becomes just a priority in terms of time versus money. Does it make sense? And there's lots of people that do the pre-design in this way, or some people say, my album company does the design because I'm not particularly good at it. My talent is capturing the moment on the day. Does it make sense? So people just have to decide how they want to tell the story and work that way and so forth. So
you have to be yourself. To me, that's
totally,
there's no point in trying to be. I'm not saying you shouldn't go along and listen to Jerry Gionis, but you can't be Jerry Gionis because he's taken. You have to be yourself. You have to find out what you're best at and do that. I have no choice but to be me. I do my best. Look, the numbers have kept up really well. Nobody seems to have left, so which is really good. But we are over time. I just wanted to say 2 things. First of all, we will send out some notes. I've just skipped through a few slides here, which I had sort of as excessive. We ran out of things to say, but I'll deal with them in the notes. We will send them out. I'm not quite sure how yet. We may just put them up as a page on the blog, but we will tell you when they're available. They're written now, but that we might just change it after what we're saying. There's a few people whose questions haven't been answered, but we'll look at blog posts again. Somebody's just asked if I can put up the flexibility slide, and I cannot even remember where it is. Sorry. I remember. 34? Oh, no, that's actually an interesting one. I think this is interesting. I feel that these people who worried about price, who are being attacked on price, and that's the only question that is, you've got to get out of the loop somehow. And clearly the way to get out of the loop is to have people who already know who you are. And that is the point about the albums. If you see this beautiful product that everybody loves and it goes out there, those people are already sold when they come to see you. They know what you do, they know how much it costs. But the key thing is this: if you've got it wrong, if you're selling cheap packages, you'll get people coming back and offering what you don't want to do. They'll be asking for the cheap job that you did, and this to me is a key issue. You've got to think about the impact on your market of what you're doing today. Okay, so people are trying to tell me to look somewhere else. Oh yeah, okay, flexibility. Yeah, I think this is really important to packages. Of course you can. These people are spending a lot of money. You'll do whatever you want. Whatever they've bought, they should be able to spend more. Because after the wedding, it's going to be a completely different thing. They love their pictures. That's the key thing. I've already said photographic talent is not the only thing. It's actually about engaging with their client that's more important than whether that image is going to win at the awards, because the client's idea of a good picture is completely different to your competitors, I suspect. The flexibility thing there about an album credit, people get themselves in a jam because they say, I've sold them a 12 by 12 cover from brand X, and so I've got to give it to them. Well, no, you don't. There's nothing to stop you from going back and saying, look, I've got this fantastic new product and I want to show it to you. It's going to cost a little bit more, but look at it. I'll give you a deal, but honestly, I think you should consider this. The album credit idea is this: before the wedding, don't sell them a deal, sell them a credit, so that afterwards you've got the option to choose an album once they're really in the mood to purchase. It just gives you a little bit more flexibility in the deal. That was what that was about.
Lots of people actually kind of have a gift registry for paying for the album, you know.
Yeah, somebody's mentioned that too.
The thing, while that's on the slide, I mean, the thing for me is, I was listening, gosh, was it Seth Godin, or I can't remember. I was listening to an audiobook a little while ago, and in it they were talking about the rules of impromptu acting, or especially comedy, and the rule is you have to keep going forward. Does that make sense? If one actor does something, you have to keep going with that idea and change it. Because if you go and say, oh, no, I'm going to go in a different direction from that, or no, that was silly, or whatever, it kills the energy of the developing relationship between the two actors. That's the one rule. Does that make sense? So in this situation, where you're talking about flexibility in the sales process or the packages or whatever it is, you also have to keep going forward. There's no point on your first phone call going, no, you can't have the high-res images, because you're going to end up in a debate. I would just find a way of giving the person the value that they came looking for, but under your rules. Sure, you can have the high-res images. But what do you want them for? I'll put some images on Facebook, but if you buy this package, you can have the high-res images. Just find a way of going with the flow of what they want, but as quickly as possible, start setting the rules. Not what the magazine said to do, or the friend who got married and the uncle did the photography said was important, but you, the professional, the person that's passionate about this, the person with experience, the person that has heard the sob stories of the wedding stuffed up because the photography wasn't taken, and educate them. But most importantly, make sure that they know that there's going to be a friend there on the day that is going to treasure their storytelling as much as they do. And I think that's what differentiates Queensberry, is that we care about how the story is told as much as the bride and the groom or the photographer. And well, that's why I'm so passionate about it anyway. But
he's only just getting warmed up too, people. Honestly,
yeah,
he could go on all day.
I can stop, yeah.
Hey, yeah, look, it's 10 minutes past. We should probably, if you've got more questions, two things. If you've got more questions, please send them in, and we will answer them one way or the other. That's number one. Number two, as we said at the beginning, this is our first time with this content. It's our first time with this format. If you could please tell us what you think, good or bad, give us marks out of 5. Remember that we're very sensitive, but if you tell us what you think, and so we can do it better next time. And the last thing is, remember that next week at the same time, I think, Nigel, I'm not sure when, but there is another webinar, which will be completely different. I'll be demonstrating the spreadsheet that Stephen was talking about. The goal of that is to say, how much do I need to charge in order to make the income that I want from the business that I'm doing now? So if you want to come back to that, that would be really awesome. We appreciate this. I'll pass it back to Nigel now, and he can wind up, I think. But thanks, Stephen, and thanks, Joe, for your contributions. And I hope everybody enjoy themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to thank everybody for turning up, and we're obviously always humbled by people spending their time with us and so forth, and very grateful for the relationship we have with photographers. So thanks everybody, and thanks for listening. So
cool. Thanks a lot, guys. Good work. First time. Yeah, thanks to all those who participated and asked questions, and we will get back to you. Just before we go, Ian mentioned our blog. I've just put a link in the chat, which I've sent out to everyone. That's our blog. Keep an eye on that. We post all sorts of good stuff, from marketing to business to album design to all sorts of stuff. We also post about webinars and that sort of thing on the blog. And if you are interested in coming to next week's webinar, Ian's right, same time next week. I've just put a link there to the registration page, so if you do want to sign up for that, the link's there. I think that's about us, so thanks a lot for coming along. We'll stick around for 5 or 10 minutes and just answer the questions that are coming in. Ian will close his screen and we'll turn the audio off, but we will be here, so if you have any last minute ones, do chat in, and we'll hope to see you back at another webinar shortly. Thanks a lot for coming along.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Nigel. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.